Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we are going to be looking at one of the many Seiko watches that have garnered nicknames from passionate Seiko collectors. This is the Seiko SBDC031, better known as the Seiko Sumo. Seiko has a rich history of making divers' watches dating all the way back to their first diver in 1965. Still today, the Seiko brand is often synonymous with divers' watches, both in their lower-end entry-level models, as well as their higher-end pieces. Over time, many of these watches have been dubbed various names by Seiko collectors, including Turtle, Samurai, Shogun, Tuna, Monster, Arnie, and of course, Sumo. Due to Seiko being a Japanese brand, many of these nicknames have a connection to Japan. There is some debate about how exactly this watch came to have the nickname Sumo. The generally accepted reason is that the name comes from the large case size and heavy weight of the watch, combined with a rather thin bracelet, which makes the watch look very big when worn. Big, round, and Japanese, just like a sumo wrestler. This particular model comes from the second generation of sumo watches, with the first not bearing the Prospex X on the bottom half of the dial. In 2019, a third generation was also released, with various updates to the movement, crystal, and bezel insert. I feel that the new generation of Sumo has lost some of the character of the original designs, with the distinctive markings of the bezel insert being reduced in size and thickness. The second generation Sumo was available in a few different colors, with quite a few limited editions also being released. In addition to this black version, blue, Pepsi, Paddy, and green colors were available as standard, with a Zimbi, which is a Thailand-only model, and 50th anniversary limited editions also being released in limited numbers. When it was available, the SBDC031 was listed at a retail price of $600 and was available directly from Seiko, as well as a wide range of retail outlets. Because of the wide availability, discounts on the RRP were very easy to find, and when I bought this about 4 years ago, I was able to save about 30%. Compared to the newer third generation of Sumo watches, the second generation was significantly cheaper. The third generation currently retails for over $900. This is partly due to the upgrades of the movement to a 6R35 and sapphire crystal. Getting into the details of this watch, beating inside is the 6R15 movement, a step above the regular 4R35 seen in many of Seiko's other entry dive watches, such as the Turtle and Samurai. It is housed in a 45mm case, with a thickness of 13.3mm, a size that understandably earned its nickname. For many, this case size is much too large to wear without looking silly, but to the credit of the Seiko design team, it carries its size well when on wrist. A slightly curved crystal protects the dial. This is Seiko's proprietary Hardlex material, which is more or less equivalent to mineral crystal. The overall lug-to-lug length of this watch is also quite large, especially by Seiko standards, coming in at 52.6mm. Thankfully, the inverted mid-link of the end links on this bracelet do not increase this lug length. The bracelet on this watch defies general watch proportions for such a large watch. Normally, you would expect a bracelet on a watch this size to be at least 22mm or larger, but Seiko decided to use a 20mm width for the bracelet. This helps the watch to feel a little smaller when being worn. Drilled lug holes also help make changing straps much easier on the Sumo. A screw-on caseback featuring the brand name, signature embossed wave, as well as various details of the watch, provides 200 meters of water resistance, which is what you would expect from an ISO-certified dive watch. Unusual for Seiko at this price, this watch has a signed crown. This crown is a screw-down crown, helping to maintain that water resistance rating. The dial on this watch is very much function over form. Large, round applied markers make for a very legible dial, and a distinctive triangle marker at 12 helps you to read the time correctly in low light. The Seiko logo is printed rather than applied, as is all text on the bottom half of the dial. Seiko chose to use a white date wheel on this watch, and I feel that was the right choice. Many people today talk about color-matching date wheels with the dial. For example, a watch with a black dial should have a black date wheel with white numbers to match. I disagree with that line of thinking for this watch, as I feel the white helps to balance the 9 o'clock marker on the other side of the dial and maintain some symmetry. The date is framed simply by a rectangle printed in white. Around the dial on the chapter ring are minute markers, with each 5-minute interval marked with a larger white rectangle. Thankfully, this watch is not plagued by the misalignment that happens on so many Seiko dive watches these days. Well-proportioned, thick hands again aid with legibility when reading the time. Hour and minute hands are sword-style hands, while the second hand is a paddle style with a loomed tip. The top surfaces of the hands are all high-polished. Taking a look at the case, we can see a very interesting and fairly complex shape. The smooth, sweeping lines of the case, especially when viewed from the side, show a very curved profile that hugs the wrist nicely and manages the 13.3mm thickness well. The upper surface of the watch is brushed all the way to the end of the lugs, but there is a small detail of high polish cutting into the inside of the lugs. This gives you more space to grip the bezel when turning, which is needed because, as we can see from the side, the bezel is partially shrouded by the case. The bezel can only be gripped from the top and bottom. The sides of the case feature 2 polished surfaces split by a finely brushed area. The lower polished surface also cuts quite dramatically back underneath the case, helping it to appear thinner than the watch actually is. The crown is completely unguarded on the Sumo. As mentioned, the 120-click bezel is partially shrouded by the sides of the case, but where you can grip is finished in a coin-edge style. This makes it quite easy to grip and turn, and in just a moment we'll have a look at the bezel action. The insert is brushed aluminium, with just a loomed pip at 12 o'clock, and the famous thick lettering marking each 10 minutes. Like every other Seiko diver, the bezel uses a click spring to turn, and has that unique Seiko sound and feeling. Moving on to the bracelet, it looks to be a 5-piece link with those slim polished sections, but it is actually just a 3-piece. The top surface is brushed, and the sides of the bracelet are polished to match the case. The bracelet is very comfortable to wear. The clasp is finished similarly to the bracelet, with polished sides. The Seiko logo is stamped into the fold-over, but unfortunately the clasp is just pressed rather than milled. 4 positions of micro-adjustment mean that it should be relatively easy to get a good fit. Being a certified diver's watch, the clasp also includes a folding diver's extension to increase the size of the bracelet, allowing you to fit it over a wetsuit and take it into the water. The other essential element of a dive watch is the lume. This allows divers to easily read the time while underwater. Seiko is well known for using very good lume on its watches, and thankfully, the Sumo does not disappoint. Seiko's Lume Bright has been liberally applied, and as you can see, the time is very clearly visible once the lights go out. Now that we've looked at the watch in detail, let's get it on wrist to see how it wears. As mentioned, the large size of this watch is balanced quite well by the smaller bracelet, as well as the undercut to the case, helping it to sit nicely on the wrist. Being a black, simple diver, this watch works well on a variety of straps, including these NATO and silicone straps. In recent times, Seiko have been trying to position themselves higher in the market, increasing prices on many of their watches. I feel that this watch represents part of the golden age of Seiko, where you could get a very well-made watch with a mid-range movement inside for around the $400 mark. Granted, newer models have improved movements and specs, which cost more to produce, but if you can find one of these older generation Sumos in good condition, grab it while you can. They represent great value, and as long as you can pull off the larger case size, look the business too. What do you think about this watch? Do you prefer the updated Sumo released in 2019? How do you feel about the recent price increases? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.